The silence in the kitchen was the first thing that hit me. Not the usual morning quiet, but something deeper, heavier. I walked in, coffee mug in hand, and the air just felt empty. No clinking of Jasper's tags as he stretched awake. No soft thud of his tail against the floorboards. My stomach dropped. "Mom," I called out, my voice thin. Lorelei was already at the island, impeccably dressed as always, sipping tea from a delicate porcelain cup. She barely glanced up from her tablet. "Good morning, Sydney. You're up early." I ignored the pleasantry, my eyes scanning the empty space where Jasper's bed usually was, where his water bowl had been just last night. "Where's Jasper?" She took another slow sip, then set the cup down with a soft clink. Her gaze finally met mine, cool and unblinking. "Oh, him. I sold him." Before we continue, drop a comment with where you're watching from. I love seeing my global reach. The words hung in the air, flat and final. I was 25 years old, a recent college graduate with my own burgeoning online business, and my mother had just told me she sold the last living connection I had to the man I loved. My mind went blank for a second, then flooded with 1,000 images. Nico, laughing, his arm around Jasper as the golden retriever licked his face. Nico, on one knee, a small box in his hand. Jasper sitting patiently beside him. Nico, gone. Just like that, in a car accident that still felt like a phantom limb, a constant ache. Jasper was the only thing left that still smelled like him, that still looked at me with the same unconditional love. "You... what?" My voice was barely a whisper. Lorelei sighed, a theatrical puff of air that always signaled her impatience. "Honestly, Sydney, you're 25. It's time you focused on your future, not clinging to the past. That dog was a constant reminder of, well, of everything. You've been moping around, not prioritizing your professional growth. It was holding you back." She spoke as if she'd done me a favor, a benevolent act of tough love. Her eyes flickered to my still damp hair, my comfortable sweatpants, a silent judgment on my lack of priorities. Lorelei, at 52, had always been obsessed with appearances, with control, with projecting an image of effortless perfection. My grief, my quiet struggle, didn't fit into her perfectly curated world. "I found a lovely couple," she continued, oblivious to the ice forming in my veins. "They live upstate, have a big yard. He'll be much happier there. You were hardly giving him the attention he needed, always holed up in your room with your laptop." The accusation was a blunt instrument. I worked. I built my business. I was trying to rebuild my life after it had been shattered. But in Lorelei's world, if it wasn't a prestigious corporate job or a wealthy husband, it wasn't priorities. I stood there, frozen, my hands clenched around the mug, knuckles white. Part of me wanted to scream, to shatter the delicate teacup, to demand to know how she could do something so cruel. But the words wouldn't come. The grief, the shock, it all just solidified. It turned into a hard, cold knot in my chest. She watched me, a faint smirk playing on her lips, as if expecting a breakdown, a dramatic display she could then dismiss. But I gave her nothing. I just stared at her, really looked at her, and for the first time I saw her not as my mother, but as an opponent. "I see," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. I turned, walked back to my bedroom, and closed the door softly behind me. I didn't cry. There were no tears left. I just sat on the edge of my bed, the silence deafening without the rhythmic breathing of Jasper curled at my feet. I looked out my window at the sprawling backyard, the manicured lawn, the perfect rose bushes Lorelei tended with such meticulous care. This house, this life, everything was hers, controlled by her. A new kind of clarity settled over me, a cold, hard resolve. Okay then, if everything can be bought and sold, I'll buy yours too. The cold resolve that had settled in my chest the morning Lorelei told me she'd sold Jasper didn't thaw. If anything, it solidified into something sharp, something that drove me forward. I was 25, a recent graduate, and the cold resolve that had settled in my chest didn't thaw. My burgeoning online business that Lorelei dismissed was about to become my weapon. Lorelei, at 52, continued to glide through our house like a queen, oblivious to the quiet storm brewing under her roof. She saw my silence as resignation, my increased time in my room as further evidence of my moping. She'd occasionally make a cutting remark about my lack of social life or my unhealthy attachment to a laptop, but mostly she ignored me, and that was exactly what I needed. Her dismissive attitude was my camouflage. I doubled down on my business, taking on more clients, pushing myself through late nights. My online consultancy, which specialized in digital strategy for small businesses, became my entire world. It was tedious at first, the pay barely enough to cover my coffee habit, but I was learning. Every late night, every complex problem solved, felt like a small victory. My former professor, Dr. Evelyn Reed, had been instrumental. She was the one who first mentioned Holden Gray, a former student of hers who'd built a successful career in property rights law. "He's sharp, Sydney," she'd said, "and he understands the nuances of business structure. You might find his advice invaluable for setting up your own venture." I reached out, nervous but determined. Holden, then 28, was surprisingly approachable. He saw something in me, I think. Not just a grieving girl, but someone with a clear, if unspoken, ambition. He became my quiet mentor, guiding me through the labyrinth of setting up an LLC, explaining the importance of legal separation and anonymity. "It's about protecting your assets, Sydney," he'd explained over a video call, his expression serious. "And sometimes protecting your plans." I didn't tell him the full scope of my plans, but he seemed to understand the need for discretion. While Lorelei was out at her charity luncheons or garden club meetings, I was holed up in my room, the glow of my laptop illuminating spreadsheets and legal documents. I built my portfolio, charging more with each successful project. The money wasn't just for a comfortable future, it was seed money. Every dollar was a brick in a wall I was building, a wall around my new life, a wall against her. In the months that followed, my online consultancy was generating a significant income. I was still living at home, enduring Lorelei's passive-aggressive comments about my extended stay. But every day I stayed was a calculated move. I was closer to my goal. My younger cousin, Skylar, then 17, was the only one who seemed to notice the shift. She'd pop into my room sometimes, drawn by the faint hum of my laptop and the focused intensity she rarely saw in our family. "What are you always doing?" she'd ask, perched on my bed, scrolling through her phone. I'd just offer a vague answer about freelance projects or client work, but She was observant. I'd catch her watching me, a thoughtful frown on her face, as if trying to decipher the new, quiet energy I radiated. She saw the hours I put in, the way I ignored Lorelei's barbs, the way I moved with a purpose that was entirely my own. For months, I'd been quietly searching for Jasper, contacting local shelters and rescue groups, even scouring online pet rehoming forums. This networking event in New York City was just another place I was casting a wide net, hoping for a lead. It was a rare escape from Lorelei's suffocating presence. The air buzzed with ambition and possibility. I was mingling, exchanging business cards, when I overheard a conversation at a nearby table. A young couple, animated, talking about their golden retriever. "He's such a sweet dog," the woman was saying, "but our new apartment just isn't big enough. And with the baby coming, we're looking to rehome him." My blood ran cold. I froze, my ears straining. "He's a rescue, actually," the man added. "Got him from a woman who said her daughter couldn't care for him anymore. Poor thing was a bit withdrawn at first, but he's really come out of his shell. His name is Jasper." My breath hitched. Jasper. It couldn't be. I discreetly edged closer, my heart pounding. They pulled out their phones, showing pictures, and there he was. Older, a little grayer around the muzzle, but unmistakably him, right down to the small, distinctive scar above his left eye, a memento from a playful tumble he'd taken as a puppy. "Where are you located?" I asked, my voice a little too eager. They looked up, surprised by my sudden intrusion. "Oh, we're from outside Albany," the woman said, gesturing vaguely upstate. "It's a bit of a drive." Albany. My stomach twisted. He was alive. He was well. But he was hundreds of miles away, and getting him back wouldn't be as simple as just showing up. Not yet. Returning home from New York felt like stepping back into a carefully constructed stage play. The air in the house was thick with Lorelei's usual blend of passive aggression and self-congratulation. I was still reeling from seeing Jasper's picture, from the knowledge that he was alive and hundreds of miles away. It fueled the fire, hardening my resolve even further. "So, your little networking event was a success?" Lorelei, at 52, asked one evening over dinner, her tone dripping with mock interest. She didn't wait for an answer. "It's good that you're finally trying to make something of yourself. I'm just glad I can provide you with a stable environment to do so. Not everyone is fortunate enough to have a mother who lets them stay rent-free after graduation, you know." I just nodded, pushing a piece of salmon around my plate. "It was productive, Mom." "Thank you for your generosity." The words tasted like ash, but I kept my face neutral. Every word she uttered, every dismissive glance, was another brick in the wall I was building, another reason to push harder. The moment I was back in my room, the laptop was open. The discovery of Jasper had added a new layer of urgency, but the house was still the foundation. I knew Lorelei had always been meticulous about her image, but less so about the nitty-gritty of financial administration. I remembered snippets of conversations, complaints about paperwork mix-ups and county inefficiencies from years ago. It was a long shot, but I started digging. Using the resources Holden had pointed me towards, I accessed public records for our property. It took days of sifting through obscure county websites and cross-referencing documents. What I found was a small but significant administrative oversight from years back, regarding a property tax assessment. It had accumulated penalties, and while Lorelei had paid most of her taxes, this specific older discrepancy had quietly escalated. It hadn't led to foreclosure, but it had put the property on a list for a quiet, almost obscure, county-led auction to clear the lien. It was exactly the kind of bureaucratic mess Lorelei would have delegated or simply ignored until it became a problem. I immediately called Holden. He was 29 now, and his calm, analytical voice was a balm to my racing thoughts. "It's a niche area," he explained, "but it happens. Properties with long-standing, unresolved liens can be quietly put up for sale to recover the outstanding amount. It's not a foreclosure, per se, but a tax deed sale. The good news for you is it often flies under the radar of major real estate players. The bad news is it's a complicated process." He guided me through the steps. My LLC, established months ago, was perfect for this. It provided the anonymity I needed. We worked meticulously, submitting bids through a third-party agent to ensure no direct link to my name. It was a slow, agonizing process, conducted entirely online and through secure channels. Every bid felt like a gamble, every waiting period an eternity. I had to ensure my bids were high enough to secure the property, but low enough not to draw undue attention or suspicion from Lorelei, should she somehow stumble upon the public records. Skylar, now 17, became an increasingly frequent visitor to my room. She'd sprawl on my bed, scrolling on her phone, but her eyes would often drift to my screen. "Are you always working?" she'd ask, her voice laced with a mix of awe and concern. She noticed the late nights, the hushed phone calls, the intense focus in my eyes. She saw the spreadsheets, the legal documents, the financial charts, but she couldn't possibly piece together the full picture. "Just building my business," I'd say, offering her a small, tight smile. "It takes a lot of effort." She'd nod slowly, her brow furrowed. "Mom says you should get a real job, like in an office." "Your mom and Lorelei have very traditional ideas about what a real job is," I replied, keeping my voice even. "Some of us preferred to build our own empires." I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, understanding perhaps, or maybe just a nascent rebellion against the very traditional ideas she was being raised with. Weeks bled into months. I continued to live under Lorelei's roof, playing the dutiful, if somewhat withdrawn, daughter. She continued to make her veiled comments, unaware that the very ground she walked on was slowly, meticulously, being pulled out from under her. My bank account, once a source of quiet pride, was now a war chest, steadily depleted by the bids and legal fees. But it was worth it. Every penny. Then, one Tuesday morning, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line was terse, professional. My heart hammered against my ribs as I clicked it open. It was from the county's property office, forwarded by Holden's assistant. The anonymous offer, submitted through my LLC, had been accepted. The house was mine. The confirmation email about the house felt surreal. I reread it a dozen times, the words blurring, then sharpening into focus. My LLC, the anonymous offer, accepted. The house was mine. The quiet triumph that swelled in my chest was quickly followed by a surge of adrenaline. This wasn't the end, just the beginning of the next phase. Holden, now 29, was on the phone almost immediately. "Congratulations, Sydney. The paperwork is extensive, but we're on track for a closing date in about 6 weeks. It's a clean title transfer, No issues. 6 weeks, I repeated, the words tasting like victory. 6 weeks of living under Lorelei's roof, knowing I owned the very floorboards she walked on. The irony was a bitter, satisfying taste. With the house secured, my focus shifted. Jasper. The image of him, older but still unmistakably himself, had been burned into my mind since the New York trip. I'd kept the contact information for the couple in Albany, but I hadn't reached out directly. I needed a plan, a way to reclaim him without raising any flags. I spent hours researching rescue networks, particularly those specializing in golden retrievers. I found a reputable, non-profit organization that facilitated private rehoming, often acting as a neutral third party. They vetted both the current owners and potential new adopters, ensuring a safe transition for the animal. It was exactly what I needed. I contacted them, explaining my situation carefully. I didn't mention Lorelei, only that I was trying to reacquire a specific dog that had been rehomed by a family member. I provided the unique scar detail, the approximate age, and the general location. The rescue network was professional and understanding. They contacted the couple in Albany, explaining that a previous owner was interested in re-adopting Jasper through their network, ensuring a safe and ethical process. It took weeks of back and forth, background checks, and even a virtual home visit, which I conducted from a friend's apartment, explaining I was moving soon and needed a temporary setup. The couple, it turned out, genuinely loved Jasper, but were overwhelmed by their new baby and smaller living space. They were relieved to know he was going to someone who already had a deep bond with him. Finally, the day came. I drove the 3 hours upstate, my hands tight on the steering wheel, a knot of anticipation in my stomach. When I walked into their living room, Jasper was lying by the fireplace, his head on his paws. He looked up, his ears twitching, and then he saw me. His head snapped up, his tail gave a tentative thump, then another, faster. He scrambled to his feet, a low whine rumbling in his chest, and then he was barreling towards me, a blur of golden fur and joyful barks. He jumped up, front paws on my chest, licking my face with frantic, happy energy. I knelt, burying my face in his soft fur, tears finally, unexpectedly, stinging my eyes. He smelled like Nico. He smelled like home. He was older, yes. His muzzle was dusted with more grey than I remembered, and there was a slight stiffness in his gait when he walked. But his eyes, those warm, intelligent golden eyes, were exactly the same. They held the same unwavering devotion. This was him. My Jasper. The couple watched, smiling. "He clearly remembers you," the woman said, her voice soft. I spent an hour with them, signing paperwork, thanking them profusely. I loaded Jasper into my car, a special dog bed already set up in the back seat. He curled up immediately, letting out a deep, contented sigh. I reached back and scratched behind his ears, feeling the familiar warmth of his fur. This wasn't just revenge. This was restoration. This was taking back what was stolen, piece by agonizing piece. I didn't bring him home. Not yet. Lorelei couldn't know. I had arranged for Jasper to stay at a boarding facility, a town over, a place with large grassy runs and attentive staff. It was expensive, but it was temporary, and it was safe. He needed time to adjust, and I needed to keep him hidden until the final act. A few days later, I was watering the rose bushes in the front yard, a chore Lorelei insisted on, despite my busy schedule, when Vivian, our neighbor from across the street, ambled over. Vivian, at 61, was a well-meaning but notoriously nosy woman who missed nothing. "Oh, Sydney, dear," she said, peering over the fence, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Lovely roses, just lovely. You know, I saw the strangest thing a few weeks back. A man, not from around here, I don't think. He was taking pictures of your house, very professional-looking camera, too. Stood right out there on the curb for a good 20 minutes, just snapping away." She gestured vaguely towards the street. "Thought it was odd. You don't think Lorelei's thinking of selling, do you?" My heart gave a sudden lurch. A man taking pictures. My mind raced. Could Lorelei be catching on? Had she somehow discovered the tax lien or my anonymous bids? No, that was impossible. Holden had assured me the process was discreet. Unless she was planning something herself. The tension that had been simmering beneath my calm exterior suddenly tightened into a cold knot. This wasn't just about my revenge anymore. It was about staying one step ahead. Vivian's casual comment about the man taking pictures had rattled me more than I let on. I spent the next few days in a heightened state of awareness, watching Lorelei, searching for any sign that she suspected something. But she remained her usual self, absorbed in her social calendar and meticulously tending her rose garden. The man, Holden assured me, was likely the appraiser or a county official, standard procedure for a tax deed sale. Still, the unease lingered. The 6 weeks flew by in a blur of final paperwork with Holden, hushed calls to the boarding facility to check on Jasper, and maintaining my facade for Lorelei. I was 25, and Lorelei was 52. Every interaction was a performance, every smile a lie. Finally, the closing day for the house arrived. I signed the last documents at Holden's office, the weight of the deed in my hands feeling both monumental and terrifying. It was done. I owned the house. That evening, Lorelei was in the living room, flipping through a glossy magazine when I walked in. My heart was pounding, but my voice was steady. "Mom, I have something for you." She looked up, annoyed by the interruption. "What is it, Sydney? Can't it wait? I'm trying to relax." I held out a crisp white envelope. Inside was a formal 30-day eviction notice drafted by Holden, stating that the property had changed ownership and she had 30 days to vacate. It was legally binding, professionally worded, and entirely impersonal. She took it, her brow furrowed. "What is this? Some kind of joke?" She pulled out the notice, her eyes scanning the official-looking letterhead. A flicker of confusion crossed her face, quickly replaced by a dismissive wave of her hand. "Oh, honestly, Sydney, is this some new prank of yours? Did you get a fake letter online? Because it's not funny." "It's not a prank, Mom," I said, my voice flat. "The house was sold." "You have 30 days." She actually laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. "Sold? Don't be ridiculous. This house has been in our family for generations. It's my house. What are you talking about? Some kind of scam? Did someone try to trick you?" "It's not a scam," I repeated. "It's real." I watched her, a strange detachment settling over me. This was it, the moment I had planned for, dreamed of, and she was completely, utterly unprepared. "Well, this is just absurd," she scoffed, tossing the notice onto the coffee table as if it were junk mail. "I'll call the police, or my lawyer. Someone's trying to pull a fast one. You're being incredibly naive, Sydney." She picked up her magazine again, clearly dismissing the entire exchange. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. Her disbelief was part of the plan. "Okay, Mom," I said, turning to leave. "Just make sure you read it carefully." As I walked away, I heard Skylar's voice from the hallway. She must have been coming down the stairs, drawn by the unusual tension in the air. "What was that about?" she asked, her eyes wide, darting between me and Lorelei. Lorelei just huffed. "Oh, your cousin is playing some silly game, Skylar, trying to scare me with a fake eviction notice. Honestly, the things she comes up with." Skylar's gaze met mine. She'd been observing my late-night work for months, seen the spreadsheets, the focused intensity. She wasn't as easily fooled as Lorelei. She followed me to my room, closing the door quietly behind her. "What was that, Sydney?" she whispered, her voice urgent. Is it real? About the house?" I sat on my bed, looking at her. She was 17, sharp, and had a quiet understanding that Lorelei lacked. She deserved at least a piece of the truth. "It's real, Skylar," I said, my voice low. "The house was sold. To me." Her jaw dropped. You bought it? How? Why?" "It's complicated," I said, choosing my words carefully. "Lorelei had some outstanding issues with the property taxes. It went to a quiet sale. My LLC bought it." She stared at me, processing. "But why? Why didn't you tell her?" I looked out the window at the familiar backyard. "Because she taught me a lesson, Skylar, about value, about what's important, and about how easily things can be taken away if you're not paying attention." I paused, then added, "And I deserve my own space. That's all." It wasn't the full truth, not yet, but it was enough for her to grasp the core of it, my need for autonomy. Skylar was quiet for a long moment, her eyes fixed on me, a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension on her face. She didn't look scared or even angry. She looked intrigued. The next morning, I walked across the street to Vivian's house. She was out tending her prize-winning petunias. "Vivian," I said, smiling, holding out a sealed red folder. It was thick, heavier than it looked. "Could you do me a huge favor?" She straightened up, her eyes immediately alight with curiosity. "Oh, Sydney, dear, of course. Anything for you?" "This," I said, handing her the folder, "is very important. It's a set of documents I need delivered. Could you keep it safe for me? And please, only open it and deliver it exactly 30 days from today." "Not a day sooner." I looked her directly in the eye, my gaze unwavering. "It's crucial that it's delivered on that specific day." Vivian took the folder, her fingers tracing the edges. 30 days, you say? My, what an intriguing mystery. Of course, dear. My lips are sealed. You can trust old Vivian. She tucked the folder securely under her arm, already speculating. I just smiled, a small, knowing smile. The clock was ticking. The next few weeks were a strange dance. Lorelei, at 52, continued to dismiss the eviction notice as a silly prank, occasionally making sarcastic remarks about my imaginary real estate empire. I, at 25, maintained my quiet, polite demeanor, working on my business, making sure Jasper was comfortable at the boarding facility, and counting down the days. Skylar, now 17, watched me with a new, quiet intensity. She didn't ask more questions, but her eyes held a knowing look, a silent acknowledgement of the storm brewing. I knew Lorelei wouldn't act until the very last minute. She was too proud, too convinced of her own untouchable status. My plan relied on that arrogance. On the 29th day, the day before the eviction notice officially expired, the final legal paperwork arrived via certified mail, addressed directly to Lorelei Blake. It was the formal deed transfer, the LLC registration, and a final undeniable notice from the county and my legal team, confirming the sale and the impending change of possession. It was all official, stamped, and impossible to ignore. I was in my room, working, when I heard Lorelei's shriek from the living room. It was a sound I hadn't heard from her before. Not anger, but pure, unadulterated shock, laced with a rising terror. My laptop screen blurred. This was it. I heard frantic rustling, then the sharp click of her heels as she stormed out of the house. I knew exactly where she was going. The county clerk's office. She would demand answers, demand to see the records. And there, buried in the public documents, she would find it. The registered officer of the purchasing LLC, Sidney Blake. I waited. The minutes stretched into an eternity. I could almost feel the slow, agonizing dawning of realization for her as she navigated the bureaucratic maze, her perfectly coiffed hair probably starting to fray, her designer suit feeling suddenly too tight. The image brought a cold satisfaction. Hours later, the front door slammed open with a force that rattled the entire house. "Sidney!" Her voice was raw, stripped of its usual polished cadence. I walked out of my room, slowly, deliberately, and found her standing in the foyer, her face blotchy, her eyes wild. Her hair was disheveled, a few strands escaping her perfect bun. She looked undone. "You!" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You did this! You bought my house! My house! How could you? This is a betrayal!" "A monstrous betrayal!" I stood at the bottom of the stairs, my arms crossed, my expression calm. "It's not your house anymore, Lorelei. It's mine." "But the taxes, the administrative oversight, you knew, you used it against me." Her voice cracked. "You've been living under my roof, eating my food, and all this time you were plotting to take everything from me." "You taught me about value, Lorelei," I said, my voice quiet but firm, cutting through her hysteria. "You taught me that everything has a price, that if something isn't useful, or if it's holding you back, you get rid of it. You taught me about priorities." Her eyes widened, a dawning horror replacing the rage. "What are you talking about?" "Jasper," I said, the name a cold whisper. "You sold Jasper, the last thing I had of Nico, the last piece of comfort, the only living being that truly understood what I lost. You sold him, Lorelei. You said he was a distraction, that he was holding me back from my professional growth. You said I needed to focus on my future, not cling to the past." She recoiled as if struck. "That was different. That was for your own good." "Was it?" I challenged, taking a step closer. "Or was it because his grief reminded you of mine, and my grief didn't fit into your perfect, controlled life? You wanted me to be a certain way, to move on your terms. You stripped me of my comfort, my connection, my autonomy. You taught me that if I wanted something, I had to acquire it myself. That if I wanted security, I had to build it. That if I wanted control, I had to take it." I gestured around the elegant foyer, the very space she had always commanded. "You taught me about value. I applied it. You neglected the details, the paperwork, the things you deemed beneath you. I paid attention. You saw a grieving daughter. I saw an opportunity. You sold my dog, or bought your house. Her face was a mask of disbelief, then pure, unadulterated fury. You cold, calculating, monster! You're just like your father. You have no heart. I have a heart, Lorelei, I said, my voice unwavering. It's just not one that you broke. Not anymore. You tried to break me, but you only made me stronger. You wanted me to focus on my future. I did. You wanted me to be self-sufficient. I am. You wanted me to understand the true cost of things. I do. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She was hyperventilating, her chest heaving. All the control, all the carefully constructed image had shattered around her. She was just a woman, exposed and undone. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and felt a strange mix of satisfaction and emptiness. The rage was gone, replaced by a quiet sense of finality. I'm going to give you some space, I said, my voice calm, almost gentle. You have 24 hours to make arrangements. Tomorrow, I'll be moving in officially. I turned and walked away, leaving Lorelei standing alone in the ruins of her own pride, the silence of the house now truly mine. The next morning felt like the first day of the rest of my life. I woke up early, the house eerily quiet. Lorelei, at 52, was nowhere to be seen. I suspected she was already out, probably making frantic calls, trying to salvage what she could of her shattered world. I, at 25, felt a strange lightness, a sense of purpose that had been building for years. I called the boarding facility. I'm coming to pick up Jasper, I told the manager. He's coming home. The drive to the facility was filled with a nervous energy. Jasper, when he saw me, erupted in a joyous bark, his tail a golden blur. He jumped into the back of my car, settling into his bed with a contented sigh. He was finally coming home, to our home. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw a small, hastily packed suitcase by the front door. Lorelei's car was gone. She hadn't waited. Good. It made things simpler. I unlocked the front door, Jasper trotting in ahead of me, sniffing every corner, his tail wagging. The house felt different now. No longer a cage, but a canvas. Just then, Vivian, at 61, ambled across the street, the red folder clutched in her hand. Her eyes, usually so full of nosy curiosity, were wide with a mixture of shock and something like awe. Skylar, 17, was right behind her, her gaze fixed on me. She must have seen me pull up, seen Jasper. Sydney, dear, Vivian exclaimed, her voice hushed. Lorelei. She just left. In such a state. And that folder, it's been 30 days exactly, hasn't it? I nodded, a small, genuine smile touching my lips. It has, Vivian. Thank you. You can give it to Lorelei. Vivian looked confused. But she's gone. She just drove off, muttering about betrayal and... Well, it wasn't pretty. Just then, a black car pulled up to the curb. Lorelei, looking surprisingly composed despite her earlier departure, emerged from the passenger side, flanked by a stern-faced man in a suit. Her lawyer, no doubt. She must have decided to make one last stand, to confront the new owner directly. Her eyes, still red-rimmed, narrowed when she saw me, then widened in disbelief as Jasper trotted happily around my legs. Sydney! She hissed, her voice low and dangerous. What is the meaning of this? Who is this man? You think you can just walk in here? She gestured wildly at the house, her house, which was now undeniably mine. The lawyer stepped forward. Ms. Blake, I'm Mr. Harrison. My client is here to finalize the transfer of property. I understand there may have been some misunderstandings. Lorelei scoffed. Misunderstandings! This is fraud! This is my daughter, who has been living under my roof, who has orchestrated a scheme to steal my home. I want to speak to the owner. I stepped forward, Jasper nudging my hand, his soft fur a comfort. You're speaking to her, Lorelei? Lorelei froze. Her eyes darted from me to the house, then back to me, as if seeing me for the first time. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Her face drained of color. Vivian, sensing the dramatic tension, stepped forward, the red folder still in her hand. Oh, Lorelei, dear. Sydney asked me to give this to you, said it was very important, for exactly 30 days. She held out the folder. Lorelei took it, her hands trembling. She tore open the seal, her eyes scanning the contents. The official deed, registered to my LLC. The LLC registration, clearly listing me as the officer. And then, at the bottom, a stack of photos. Photos of me with Jasper at the boarding facility, playing in the grass, his happy face looking up at mine. A photo of him curled on a new dog bed, looking utterly content. Her eyes flickered from the legal documents to the photos, then back to my face. The rage, the disbelief, the humiliation, it all washed over her. She crumpled, not physically collapsing, but internally, her entire posture shrinking, the queen of appearances undone. Jasper, she whispered, her voice barely audible, her eyes fixed on the photos. You got him back? I did, I confirmed, my voice steady. You taught me that everything can be bought and sold. So I bought back what you took, and then I bought what you valued most. Lorelei stared at the red folder, then at me, then at Jasper, who was now sitting patiently by my side. Her carefully constructed world, built on control and appearances, had imploded. She looked utterly lost, humiliated, and broken. The silence stretched, heavy with the weight of years of unspoken resentments and calculated revenge. Skylar, who had been watching the entire scene unfold from a few feet away, finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it cut through the tension. Was it worth it, Sydney? Skylar's question. Was it worth it? Hung in the air, a quiet echo in the aftermath of Lorelei's collapse. Lorelei, at 52, was still standing there, clutching the red folder, her lawyer trying to usher her away, but her eyes were fixed on me, on Jasper. It was a look I'd never seen from her before. Not anger, not disdain, but a raw, naked bewilderment. I didn't answer Skylar immediately. I just watched Lorelei being led, almost dragged, to her lawyer's car. She got in without another word, without a backward glance. The car pulled away, leaving a strange, hollow silence. Jasper nudged my hand, then leaned his head against my leg, a warm, solid presence. I knelt and wrapped my arms around his neck, burying my face in his fur. His familiar scent, a mix of dog and Nico, filled my senses. He licked my cheek, a soft, comforting gesture. "Come on, boy," I murmured, standing up. "Let's get you settled." Skylar, 17, followed me into the house. She didn't ask again, but her eyes were still on me, waiting. I led Jasper to the kitchen, filled his water bowl, and watched him drink. The house felt like mine, truly mine, for the first time. The air was lighter, the silence no longer heavy with Lorelei's unspoken judgments. In the days that followed, I settled into the house with Jasper. The immediate sharp satisfaction of Lorelei's humiliation began to fade, replaced by a quieter, more complex emotion. The house was mine, Jasper was back, and Lorelei was gone. I had achieved everything I set out to do, but the peace I'd imagined, the complete sense of closure, still felt elusive. It wasn't a void, but it wasn't the absolute triumph I'd anticipated either. It was just quiet. My business, however, continued to thrive. A week after Lorelei moved out, a letter arrived from Holden. He was 29 now, and his firm was expanding, looking to acquire a smaller, specialized property law practice. He offered me a significant contract to overhaul their digital presence, a project that would require a substantial investment of my time and expertise, but also promised considerable financial reward and exposure. It was an opportunity to expand my business beyond what I'd imagined, a new frontier. Skylar started visiting often. She'd come over after school, sometimes just sitting in the living room while I worked, sometimes asking about my business, about Holden, about the house. She never brought up Lorelei directly, but her questions about my journey, my drive, were clear. "You're so focused," she said one afternoon, watching me type. "It's like nothing can stop you." I paused, looking at her. "It's not about being unstoppable, Skylar. It's about deciding what you want, and then doing whatever it takes to get it, even if it takes years." She nodded slowly, absorbing my words. I saw in her eyes a reflection of my younger self, a girl trying to navigate a world that felt both stifling and unfair. She was learning from me, seeing the consequences of Lorelei's actions, and the long, arduous path I'd taken to reclaim my life. I realized I had become her cautionary tale, a living example of what happens when you're pushed too far, and what revenge can cost. Lorelei, as it turned out, moved into a small condo a few streets away, a place far less grand than her former home, but still respectable enough for her image. I'd see her sometimes, walking her new, meticulously groomed poodle, or getting into her car. She never looked my way, and I never looked hers. The silence between us was absolute. Jasper, now fully settled, would often curl up at my feet while I worked, his soft snores a comforting rhythm. He was older, a bit slower, but his presence was a constant, gentle reminder of Nico, and of the love that had been stolen, then reclaimed. The house was no longer just a symbol of revenge. It was my home. It was where I built my business, where I found a new kind of peace, not the explosive kind, but a quiet, steady one. People think Karma is a debt collector, but she's an investor. She waits, then compounds, just like I did.